Here's a little liturgy trivia for you. How you might sometimes wonder, how is it that the readings are chosen for particular days? And this one has a couple of unique little anomalies. First of all, it's mostly just working our way successively through the particular book. Like we've been listening to First Kings section on the prophet Elijah, King Ahab, Jezebel, the prophet Elisha. So we've just been kind of working our way through that book. And then what our church does for us is we've finished the life of Elijah. Yesterday we heard about his ascension into heaven on the fiery chariot. And so today now we jump to a completely different book, the book of Sirach. But in this section of Sirach is just a litany of praise of all the great patriarchs of Israel. And so this is a little bit of that section of all the history of Israel that talks about Elijah and Elisha. So after hearing about the life of Elijah and the prophet Elisha, now we hear this hymn of praise, celebrating their goodness. So the church is sort of laying out their lives, and then we'll continue on with another book after that. Now the Gospels also are working our way through the Gospel of Matthew. So yesterday we actually heard the installment that is usually heard on Ash Wednesday about, when you pray, we hear part of it today. When you pray, don't babble on like the Pharisees who just think they're multiplication of words. Or when you give alms, don't do it for show. Or when you fast, don't do it for show, but do it sincerely. Okay, so that's what we hear at the beginning of Lent, but it just happens to be in the succession here, this 11th week of ordinary time, just working our way through. And then, very interestingly enough, when it has the Lord's Prayer, it's not directly from the New American Bible. Everything we hear is directly from the New American Bible. But when they put it in the lectionary, sometimes they tweak it a little bit. Not to change any meaning at all, but more to make it understandable to the listener. So, for instance, if it's in the middle of a long speech and we're hearing segments of the speech of Jesus, then they'll add the little bit Jesus said to his disciples, because he said that maybe at verse 1, but now we're at verse 20, and we're jumping in at verse 20. So they just sort of add that in. But here, very uniquely, when it comes to the Lord's Prayer, they don't do what is the literal of what is in the New American Bible, but they put in the Lord's Prayer the way we pray it, so that we get the point that Jesus is talking to us about prayer with a prayer, the exact wording we use every day. Because you don't see thee and thou pretty much in the New American Bible. But in the lectionary, they put it here because that's how we pray the Lord's Prayer. Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will. Okay. So, now, the trivia lesson over. What is the Lord trying to tell us in these scriptures today? Well, this gospel particularly ties in with yesterday because this also is a little snippet that's taken out. The way that it reads in the Gospel of Matthew, first he cautions against doing righteous deeds just to be seen. So when you give alms, don't do it for show, but do it quietly. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing. So it's sincere. Do it out of sincerity, not just to impress people. Okay, and then he says, and when you give, and then when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to stand up and pray in public, okay, so that others may see them. No, they've received their reward. When you pray, go to your room and pray in silence. And then he teaches the Lord's Prayer. Well, but they kind of took that out and saved it for today so it could stand on its own. And then, when you fast, don't go around looking gloomy like the hypocrites who neglect their appearance so others may see that they're fasting. Oh, look how much they're suffering. That's not the purpose. Groom yourself. Look good and make sure you're going around with a charitable attitude so no one will know that you're fasting. Again, in all these things, and of course in praying the Lord's Prayer, we should do so with sincerity. It should be a genuine prayer. But you know, we all know this. If you've been Catholic for any length of time, we've all prayed the Lord's Prayer, whipping through it really quick without paying attention. We've all done that. And we know that that's wrong. And I know for myself, it's easy to get into that habit. You know, the prayer that I'm supposed to do as a priest, and also just praying that any baptized Christian should be about prayer. Sometimes I have, I'm a really busy day, and so I try to cram it into less time or try to do more things, and then it's not really praying. I'm just accomplishing some task. Well, I think that when this gospel comes up, it's just another reminder. Pray sincerely. Mean it. I know this priest, when people come to confession, sometimes he says, he was writing this in an article, he says, sometimes I tell people your penance today is to pray one Our Father, but pray it slowly. Mean every word. Because that's better than saying pray 5 Our Fathers. Because what I would do is probably go through them quickly. But pray one Our Father slowly. So as we learn about the Lord's Prayer today, let's take that to heart. And maybe today, make it a point to pray the Lord's Prayer slowly. Let every word have meaning. Think, what does this mean to say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven? What is that? How can I help to make God's kingdom to be accomplished on earth? Well, part of it is just my own life. My own life should reflect the kingdom. That's an example of how we can think about the Lord's Prayer. To just pray it at least once today, very slowly and intentionally. Because that's what Christ is calling us to, authenticity of spirit.